Today on Alex and Autos, we're out here taking a look at the 2015 BMW X4. Now the X4 is a little bit difficult to compare with other vehicles, as you'll see at the end of this video, because there really isn't anything else like this out on the market. The reason for that is that the X4 is supposed to be the four-door sport utility coupe version of the BMW X3, and there really isn't anybody else out there trying to do that. I suppose you could compare this with something like the Volvo V60 Cross Country, the Mercedes-Benz GLA 250, or the Porsche Macan, but none of those vehicles is the same kind of thing as the X4. The X4 and the X3 are as closely related as most sedan and station wagon variants of the same vehicle. So you should look at this as more of a styling exercise or a styling variant of the BMW X3. Up front we have the same headlamps and the same hood as the X3, although the rest of the details are massaged a little bit versus that regular old SUV. Like the rest of the BMWs sold in the US, we have 3 different lines or trim levels available in the X4. The one we're taking a look at here is the M Sport trim. That means we have this corrugated trim right down here, slightly larger grille openings, especially over here on this side, and we don't have much chrome going on up front. You'll notice we have a slightly larger grille than the BMW X3. Personally, I think that the X-Line is the most attractive trim. HID headlamps may be optional on the X3, but they're standard on the X4, even though this is the same style module and the same size module you find on the X3. LED headlamps are available, and that would be full LED lamps, LED low beams, and LED high beams. At 183.9 inches long, the X4 is just about the same size as the X3. And from this angle, you can really see what I mean about this being a styling exercise on the X3, because the majority of the difference is right back here. Instead of a very vertical glass, we get this more lift-back appearance with kind of a tiny trunk lid. This actually is a true lift-back because this opens as one piece. It's not actually a separate trunk and separate glass. During this week, a number of people commented that it really doesn't look like an SUV to them, but the changes versus the BMW X3 are really more above the wheel than below the wheel. So we have very similar ground clearance, and we actually have standard all-wheel drive on the X4, and all-wheel drive is not standard on the X3, so you can get the X3 in rear-wheel drive. The biggest change, of course, is the roofline after the driver's door right here. It drops really quickly towards the back. That does cut down on both front and rear headroom. In terms of relative size, this is about 4 inches longer than a V60, about 10 inches longer than a Mercedes-Benz GLA 250, and 7 inches shorter than a Porsche Macan. Obviously, the rear end styling is very different from the X3 because we don't have that tailgate like we do in the X3. Again, we have a little bit more of a trunk lid. It actually sticks out a little bit further than you might think. It comes out and then it goes right back in down here, then it pops back out for the bumper. Our model has very well integrated parking sensors, and we have dual exhaust tips right over there on the driver's side only. The X4 was styled to be the X6's mini-me, and it does an excellent job at that. As a styling exercise, I have to say I think this look is very attractive. Unfortunately for me, it really results in definitely reduced practicality versus the BMW X3. And for me, practicality is the main reason for buying a crossover in the first place. The conversion from the more soccer mom looking X3 to this sexy looking X4 profile causes about a 33% reduction in cargo room, as well as some reduction of room on the inside. In the United States, there are 2 engines offered in the X4. Things start out with the 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine we're seeing right here in our xDrive28i model. This engine produces 240 horsepower and 260 pound-feet of torque. But if you take a look at that chart over there on the side of your screen, you'll notice that the torque comes on very low at 1450 RPM, and it stays strong till 4800 RPM. That is relatively unique. The twin power logo we see on BMW's 2-liter and 3-liter engines doesn't refer to twin turbos. It refers to twin exhaust inputs into the turbocharger itself. As with practically the entire BMW lineup in the United States, you can also get BMW's excellent 3-liter inline-6 turbocharged engine, producing 300 horsepower and 300 pound-feet of torque. Now, very much like that 2-liter engine, torque comes on at a very low 1200 RPM and stays strong up to 5000 RPM. Both engines are mated to an 8-speed ZF automatic transmission and standard all-wheel drive. It's a little bit different than the X3. Fuel economy comes in very close to the BMW X3, but not exactly the same. This 2-liter turbocharged engine we're taking a look at right here gets 20 miles per gallon city, 28 highway, which is interestingly a loss of 1 mile per gallon in the city. Now, if you get the 3-liter turbocharged engine, we get 1927, and that's actually a 1 mile per gallon improvement on the highway versus the X3. Like the X3, front seat comfort is absolutely excellent. We get a multi-way power driver's seat with a 4-way adjustable lumbar support, adjustable bolstering, and we also have a manual adjustable thigh extender. You should know that the 4-way adjustable lumbar support that contributes highly to the comfort level of these seats is optional on the X3 and the X4. We have a tilt telescopic steering column with a decent range of motion. It is a manual steering column, and overall I'll give front seat comfort 9 out of 10 points. These are very, very comfortable seats for this category. I think that for my body shape, the Volvo XC60 seats are ever so slightly more comfortable, but they're not as adjustable as this, so depending on your body shape, you may find them less comfortable. The Porsche Macan scores right about the same as this X4. Part of the reason that the X4 seems like less of an SUV than the X3 is because the seat bottom cushions are closer to the floor of the vehicle than they are in the X3. They're about 1 inch reduced in the front, a little bit more than 1 inch in the back. That means that if I sit right here behind myself, you'll notice I have several inches between my thighs and the seat bottom cushion. Now, children will find that a little bit more comfortable, but adults will definitely find this less comfortable for longer car trips. Headroom also gets reduced for the X4. It's not quite as noticeable up front because the seats are a little bit closer to the ground, but in the back we also get a reduction in headroom. It's about 1.5 inches less than you'll find in the BMW X3. Scooting over to the right side of the vehicle, I have this front seat adjusted all the way back, suitable for a 6'5" passenger I had in the car earlier. I do have an adequate amount of legroom there. Thanks to the positioning of this rear bench seat, I can also move over to the middle, sit upright, and my hair is just barely brushing the ceiling. Yet again, that's because the seat bottom cushion is very close to the floor. Rear seat passengers get a softly padded center armrest with 2 very large cup holders right here. And in a very nice fashion that's typical in European vehicles, the rear seats don't fold in a 60-40 folding fashion, they actually fold in a 40-20-40 folding fashion. So you can fold this center section separately from the 60 portion here, or you can fold it all together as one unit, and the center seat belt is actually part of the rear bench seat. It doesn't come down out of the ceiling. The rear seats fold almost completely flat with the rear cargo area. One nice touch is that the latch anchors are far enough back here on the seats that I had no problems installing child seats in the back. If you want to know how well they fit, there is a link on the sidebar of this video, take you on over to that special video. And as far as installing child seats, it is made a little bit easier by this 40-20-40 folding seat back, because you can fold just the 20 section down, for instance, reach back, and then connect that top tether anchor very easily back there. The biggest real difference between the X3 and the X4 is, of course, right back here in the cargo area, because we get approximately 33% less storage space back here than we get in the X3. It's also not shaped quite as advantageously either. This is a 24-inch roller bag. As you can see, I can easily put this right here in the back next to this 26-inch roller bag, but we don't have quite enough room behind it to put another roller bag. While the cargo area is definitely long for an SUV, it's not very tall, and that's really noticeable right here on the side, because you can't put items much longer than this 26-inch roller bag all the way to the back. The cargo area is in 2 non-retractable pieces. There's one piece right here that snaps in right behind the seats. We have another part right up here in the hatch. As we've come to expect from the Europeans, we also get some nice cargo management features. If we lift up the load floor, we have some additional storage space right down there. But we also have these nice cargo tie-downs. These are very similar to what you'll find in other European vehicles. We can actually latch them into this track in the back of the car. So push a little button, latch them in, and then you can slide them around at any point on this track system and then tie things down. They will stay in that ratchet system until you push the button, move them forward, and then you can pull them off again. When it comes to my exclusive truck comfort index, I'm going to have to give the X4 7 out of 10 points. This is definitely more limited in the cargo area than any other small crossover vehicle in the luxury segment, other than, again, that Porsche Macan. This is very similar to the small station wagons that you will find either in this segment or just one notch below, like that V60 Cross Country. We do, however, have a power tailgate hatch, which is a handy feature. And an emergency release. If you're shopping around on the dealer lots, this may look very similar to the BMW 3 Series GT, which seems like a very similar kind of vehicle, but it is a little bit different. And that's because the X4 shares this dashboard, steering wheel, etc. with the BMW X3. And it's really noticeable right here where the iDrive screen is placed in the dashboard. All of these parts are very similar to what you'll find in the 3 Series sedan, wagon, and the 3 Series GT. It's not exactly the same. Compared to the 3 Series variants, I think this dashboard feels a little bit nicer in person. That's largely because this is newer than the BMW 3 Series. Looking backwards, you can see that rearward visibility is hampered in the X4 versus the X3. You can also see that this very small side window over here doesn't really do anything to help improve visibility. Moving forward, you'll find fixed height seat belts for both the driver and the front passenger. It's a little bit less comfortable than the adjustable variety, and our particular model has the X embossed on the headrests. Keeping in mind that we are in the M-line trim, our model does have the red contrasting stitching, as you can see, on the front seat and rear seat cushions. We also have the extendable thigh cushion. It is a manual extender. There's a little lever right here under the front, and you can move it backwards and forwards. As with many luxury vehicles, leather is not standard, it is optional, but our particular model does have it. The light leather is carried over into the door panels with this very nicely stitched armrest and handle right here. We have two speakers in the door, one right here and one right up here by the door lock and unlock buttons. Because the X4 is not positioned the same as an X6, you will find hard touch plastics on the door. It's this black portion lower in the door panel. That is where you'll find it right around the storage bin down here, but all the touch points in this car are all soft touch plastic. Again, likely because the X3 and X4 interior is newer than the 3 Series sedan and wagon interior, we do have more soft touch plastics going on, especially lower in the dashboard. So everything down low, including this glove box cover, is actually a soft touch plastic. We have kind of a moderately sized glove box here. It is sort of a slot affair, so you can fit the instruction manual in there. I did have troubles fitting larger tablet computers inside. Moving over to the dashboard, you can see that BMW no longer styles the dashboard to have a double bump. Instead, it kind of goes right across the top of this infotainment screen. We do have a center channel speaker right there in the middle. Speaking of infotainment, if you'd like to know more about this large color infotainment screen, you can go ahead and click that banner at the bottom of your screen and you'll be taken on over to my dedicated review on this particular infotainment system. This is the latest version of BMW's iDrive with finger writing recognition. Below that, we have two large air vents right here, as you can see, and we have this interesting knob that a lot of people get confused about. This knob allows you to vary the temperature of the air coming out of the vents. Now you may ask, why do we have automatic climate control right down here? This does have a 2-zone climate control system and a manual knob. Well, the reason is this system, for instance, is set to 67 degrees Fahrenheit right now. So it will attempt to keep this car at 67 degrees Fahrenheit, but you can use this knob to actually adjust the temperature of the air coming out of vents to make these warmer or cooler, while the system still tries to maintain this particular temperature in the vehicle. This is handy because if in the summer you want slightly warmer air blowing on your face, you don't really want your face to be frozen off, you can dial this up to the red zone. Or if in the winter you'd like cooler air blowing at your face while your feet are getting heated, you can dial this down to the blue zone. These are the rest of the controls for the dual zone climate control system. We have our heated seat buttons right out here. And below that you'll find the physical buttons for the iDrive infotainment system. Now these buttons relate to system presets. These are not just radio presets. You can set them to a wide variety of things in iDrive. Single slot optical displayer, dedicated track forward and backward button, eject button, mode button, AM, FM, and this is a power volume knob. We also have the eject button right there. Below those preset buttons, you'll find a small storage cubby right here. You can put things like a smartphone right behind there in that little bin, and it doesn't fall into the cup holder, which has this little slide arrangement, two large cup holders there. This is a great deal more convenient than the setup that you find in the BMW 3 Series, which has a little lid that you have to pull off and then stick somewhere. This just slides open and closed. It has a rubbery top as well, so if you put things like a smartphone right in that little area, it doesn't really roll around. Working our way back from that, we have the same shifter we find in a wide variety of BMW models. It's based off of a joystick concept. So we press the P button to park the system. If you want to put it in drive from park, there's an unlock button right here. We push that in and then we pull the shifter back and we're in drive. You can go into reverse or back into drive without doing that. So you can see right there we didn't push that button again. But if you do want reverse, we press the button again, go all the way forward. Now we're in reverse. Pull back for drive without pushing the button, forward again for neutral, back for drive. If you want the manual or the sport modes, we pull to the left like that, and then we shift up and down, forward for down and back for up. On the left side, we have our traction control button, our drive mode switch. We can choose between Sport, Sport Plus, Comfort, and Eco Pro via the system. If you do opt for the adaptive damping system, this will control the adaptive dampers as well. We have our hill descent control, parking sensors, electric parking brake right there, and an auto parking hold. So this will keep the pressure on the brake so you don't have to keep your foot on the pedal. And then we have our iDrive controller over here. As I said, the X4 uses the latest version of BMW's iDrive system, so if you have the full option with the navigation system, etc., we do have this finger writing recognition controller. It's a little bit larger than the normal one. It allows you to write in this touch-sensitive area. We have the direct access buttons for the various features right up here, back and option down here. It scrolls around, goes up and down, side to side, and clicks to enter. Again, if you want to know more about the system, go ahead and click down there for the dedicated infotainment review. Moving over to the center console, we have a large and softly padded center armrest. We open this up to reveal BMW's dock connector. You can get various docking adapters for various phones. I'll unplug this one so you can see what they look like. Press this little eject button there. A little difficult to do with one hand. So you can see this one is designed for use with an iPhone 5. There's a little fan there right there to help keep your iPhone cool. If we press this button to get it up out of the way, we get some additional storage back here. It's also where you'll find the USB input, auxiliary input, have the ability to put wallets, glasses, that sort of thing right there. Under that, and still close the center armrest lid. Moving over to the driver's side, we have a very traditional BMW 4-dial instrument cluster with analog gauges for the tachometer, speedometer, fuel gauge, and the engine temperature. Now on the right side of this display, as part of this tachometer, you'll notice something a little bit interesting, and that is that this is actually an LCD. So this bottom portion from here on over to the 7 side and all the way over to this side is an LCD. And this is where we find the trip computer readouts right there. As you can see, we can scroll through them via a button on a stalk. And then we can also scroll down and browse through our radio presets or our media playlists. If we're on the media device, if I click over to that, you can see that we can now scroll through the playlist on my iPhone that is connected to the system. In addition to all of that, we do get navigation instructions on this very small screen. As you can see, in 150 feet, it wants us to go the other way. Zooming out to the steering wheel, we are in the M Sport model, so we get a little M badge right here. You can also see that we get the aluminum pedals in the distance in the footwell right there. This is a very comfortable, very thickly padded and thickly rimmed 3-spoke steering wheel. So you can see the paddles do move with the wheel. And we have sport grips right up here. Very thick padding all the way around. The first thing I noticed about this X4 out on the road is the M Sport package. The suspension is definitely firm, and you will really notice it out on rough roads especially. You're definitely going to find a softer ride in your base trims of the BMW X3 or even the X4. You'll also find a much more compliant ride in the BMW 3 Series GT, which is strangely enough the same shape overall as this X4, except that it's the sedan version of this shape, not the SUV version of this shape. Out on these winding mountain highways that we're on, the X4 definitely handles a little bit below the BMW 3 Series GT. The 3 Series GT just feels a little bit lighter, a little bit more nimble out on the road. Now that said, the X4 definitely doesn't feel like your average crossover in this segment. So this certainly doesn't feel like the Audi Q5 or the Volvo XC60 behind the wheel. It feels much more precise, much lighter, much more direct, much more in tune with the driver. Now let's go to the actual numbers. I ran 0 to 60 in this 2-liter turbocharged version in 6.14 seconds. I'm going to give this 8 out of 10 points. If you get the 3-liter turbocharged version, then of course it will go considerably faster than this. That places the BMW about a quarter second faster than the Audi or the Volvo with the 2-liter turbocharged engines in those competitors. There really isn't a direct competitor from any of the European players, but I'm going to toss the Volvo V60 Cross Country in this competitive segment because it's kind of a similar vehicle. 10 more horsepower over in the Volvo, but it does take about a quarter second longer to get to 60. You may be surprised to find out that the X4 really doesn't handle that much differently than the BMW X3, and that's because this is really not that much lighter than the X3. It's only about 20 pounds lighter. The center of gravity is maybe a little bit lower to the ground, but it's not a great deal of difference between this and the X3. So they handle very, very similarly out on the road. This definitely handles better than every other regular version of the Audi Q5. It handles better than most versions of the Volvo XC60. The XC60R design is sort of a similar vein in terms of suspension tuning and road grip to this particular model. The downside to the handling, as usual, is the ride. Now, in our particular model, I'm going to give the ride 6 out of 10 points. This ride is very, very firm in the M Sport model that we're in. Now, BMW does offer an adaptive suspension system, which is definitely $1,000 that I would spend in this model. Because I like the stiffer suspension some of the time, but I don't like the stiffer suspension all the time. And that adaptive suspension allows you to do that. It allows you to choose between a softer suspension most of the time and a stiffer suspension when you want it. That adaptive suspension is also relatively unique in this compact luxury crossover segment because most of the options out there have a traditional steel spring suspension with traditional non-adjustable dampers. As you'd expect, braking distances are fairly short in this vehicle, and braking fade resistance is excellent. We came in at 8 out of 10 points overall. Again, you will find better braking scores in the dedicated performance variants in this segment. Cabin noise registered 69 decibels at 50 miles an hour out on the open highway, which places this right in the middle of this luxury segment. ZF's 8-speed automatic transmission is a very willing partner in this segment. It's not quite as responsive as the transmission you'll find in the Porsche Macan that is a dual clutch transmission, but this is more responsive than you'll find from Lexus or from Volvo and the other front-wheel drive entries in this particular segment. Those do shift a little bit slower. Even though Volvo now has an 8-speed transmission in their front-wheel drive models, the majority of those other models that are front-wheel drive based or front-wheel drive biased are limited to 6 speeds. So they have fewer speeds and the shifts are a little bit slower. Compared to the rest of the Germans, Audi does use essentially the same transmission and gives very similar shift quality. Mercedes-Benz still uses an older 7-speed automatic transmission. It's not as willing of a dance partner as this particular transmission. The Mercedes-Benz GLA, which I suppose you could compare to the X4 because of the overall shape of the vehicle, It has a 7-speed dual clutch transmission, very similar to what you see in the Mercedes-Benz CLA 250, and that transmission is very rough in terms of shift quality out on the road. Comparisons within the BMW family are certainly apt. Again, this doesn't feel that much different than the BMW X3, but the X3 and the X4 do feel a little bit taller, a little bit heavier out on the road than the BMW 3 Series GT. Most X4 models come with standard all-wheel drive, and this all-wheel drive system is programmed to send the majority of the power to the rear wheels unless there's wheel slip. That means this does not feel like the Audi Q5 or the Volvo XC60, which can feel a little bit front heavy at times out on the road. This does feel very light, very nimble, very direct out on the road. That's exactly what we've come to expect from BMW. I will also say that this 2-liter turbocharged engine feels a little bit more nimble than the 3-liter turbocharged engine. However, I think I'd take the extra power. This vehicle is an awful lot of fun, and 6.14 seconds 0 to 60 is incredibly fast, don't get me wrong. And I would probably buy this if I was practical and sensible, but I think that if I did, I would always be wondering what that 3-liter turbo was like. The fuel economy isn't that much worse. It is a little bit more expensive, so you just need to decide how much fun you want to have out on the road. Pricing for the 2-liter turbocharged model we've been taking a look at starts at $44,700. If you want the 3-liter turbocharged engine, you're going to have to add about $4,000 to that. This model, as tested, rang in at $54,500. And as is typical with BMWs, you do need to be careful with your options because you can get that price tag up very high very quickly. If I was shopping for the X4, I think my preferred configuration would be $58,000. I would actually get the X line, not the M line that we've been taking a look at right here. I would get the dynamic dampers because that would improve the ride out on the highway. I'd also get the Harman Kardon sound system, the radar cruise control system, the blind spot monitoring, the LED headlamps, the heads-up display, the cold weather package, the navigation system, and possibly a few other options on the inside. That would get you right up to that $58,000 mark. The important thing to keep in mind is that, like many BMWs, navigation and leather seating is not standard at $44,700. So if you do want some of those more luxurious options, you're going to need to be prepared to pay for it. As I said initially, comparisons with the X4 are very difficult. We obviously have that X3, but we're going to cover that a little bit later. First up, we have the Volvo V60 Cross Country. The V60 Cross Country is sort of a similar mission to this. It's a utility vehicle with all-wheel drive, but it prioritizes handling over off-road ability. I honestly can't see that many people cross-shopping a V60 with an X4, but if you decide to do that, you will notice that the V60 Cross Country is about $9,000 less than the X4. We don't have the same level of handling, the same level of interior refinement, or the same kind of options going on in that Volvo, however. The closest thing in the Mercedes-Benz lineup that competes with the X4 would probably be the GLA and not the GLK, because the GLK competes with the BMW X3, but the GLA is going for a slightly more coupe-like shape. Now, I realize that may sound a little bit strange since the GLA in theory also competes with BMW's X1, but in terms of more sport utility coupe-like vehicles, it's probably the best comparison to the X4. Now, the GLA is about $13,000 less. It's also significantly smaller, significantly slower. I don't think its transmission is quite as refined, and its interior is definitely a notch below this. Now, if we compared this to the GLK, which would be the larger vehicle, the pricing would be a little bit more in line. It's definitely slower than this, however. Still, we get more cargo room in the back, but I don't think the interior of the GLK is quite as nice as this recent BMW refresh. Nestled right in the middle of the competitive set is BMW's own X3. It would appear that the X4 costs $4,300 more than the X3, even though you lose the practicality in the back. It is still a premium, but actually we get more standard equipment in this than we get in the X3. Now, I don't have much experience buying women's shoes, but I was told by a friend of mine that it's very much like buying a fancy shoe. You have to pay more for the higher style. Now, Porsche's Macan is obviously a direct competitor, and it actually is a little bit more direct than you might think, because on the surface of things, you may think the Macan competes with the X3 and the Volvo XC60 and the Mercedes-Benz GLK and the Audi Q5, but actually the Macan has a very similar format and very similar sized interior to the X4. Both vehicles have almost exactly the same sized cargo area in the back, which is again about a third smaller than the average entry in this segment. You will have to pay for the extra style that you get in the Porsche, however, just like the extra style on this X4. The Porsche will run you between $1,800 and $5,000 more than the X4 when comparably equipped. Now, you do get a little bit more power in that Porsche. You get 340 horsepower instead of 300 horsepower like you'd get in the comparable version of the X4. But you also have to keep in mind that BMW likes to be very conservative with their engine ratings. So everyone pretty much knows that this engine doesn't really produce 300 horsepower. It actually produces a little bit more. We also get a traditional 8-speed automatic in the X4. We get a 7-speed dual-clutch transmission in the Porsche, which is not quite as refined. It is a little bit sportier, it is a little bit more direct, but it's not quite as refined. The interior in the Porsche is a little bit nicer than the X4, but this X4 interior really is a great place to spend your time. Obviously, when it comes to brand choices between BMW and Porsche, that's a very personal preference. Styling is also a very personal preference, but I actually think that the X4 is more attractive in my mind than the Macan. I think the Macan looks just a little bit too overdone in its current format. It's definitely attractive, but it looks just a little bit more overwrought than the X4 that we're taking a look at here. This is a little bit more elegant, a little bit more restrained, a little bit more refined, I think, but it really depends on your personal preference. Which vehicle is right for you really depends on your priorities. If you prefer style over practicality, the X4 is definitely a good buy over the X3 because it's certainly more stylish. It doesn't really handle that much better. The handling is a little bit better than the X3, but they're very, very similar. This vehicle only weighs about 20 pounds less than the X3, and although it does have a slightly lower center of gravity, the difference is very small. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes, and this has been the 2015 BMW X4. Go ahead and find me over at facebook.com/AlexNautos, over at Twitter as AlexNautos. Comment down there in the comment section of this video. Let me know what you liked and didn't like. Go ahead and thumbs up this video. You can always send your emailed questions to alex@alexnautos.com. I'll see you next week. Roller bag right there behind it. Oh, I can't do that actually. I can't put a 24-inch roller bag right there behind it. Ah!